we find by the Akedah, the Torah tells us, Vayashkim Avram Baboker, Vayachvosh es Chamoro. He rose early and he hitched his own donkey. We find by Bilam, when he went to curse Klal Yisrael, it says, Vayashke Bilam Baboker, also he rose early, Vayachvosh es Asono, and he hitched his donkey. One's a male donkey, female donkey. So the question is, Avram at this point by the Akedah, how old was he? He was 137 years old. Avraham Avinu had tremendous wealth. He had slaves and servants who could have hitched a donkey for him. But yet Avram personally hitched his own donkey. So Rashi cites the Chazal. From here we see Sha'avam Mekalkelis as Ashura. That because Avram was consumed with this unlimited level of love for Hashem, that overrode protocol. And because of that, he hitched his own donkey due to his intense love for Hashem. Bilam, although, as it's clear from him who he was, Rucha Gevoa, Nafshu Rechova, he suffered from megalomania, but yet, when he came to curse the Jewish people, he hitched his own donkey. I mean, he also had slaves. To do such a menial task, Bilam, Hasinim Kelis Ashura. His intense hate for Klal Yisrael overrode protocol, therefore he hitched it himself. So just the simple understanding is this. A man who's so pompous, is so self-centered, how does he hitch his own donkey? How does it reflect on him? So Bilam, it's easy. The only reason why a person hesitates to do many things because he thinks about himself. But what about if the person is singly focused, committed to bring about a certain result? As a result of that, at that moment, that objective is so vital and all-consuming, at that moment, Bilam doesn't exist. All that exists is to destroy Klal Yisrael. Therefore, even Bilam, who suffers from this megalomania, he goes and he hitches his own donkey. Because at that moment, Bilam didn't exist. It was this overwhelming level of hate that he hated Klal Yisrael, that he wanted to eradicate them. Lahavdil, Avram, although he had the ability to give the order to his slaves or to his servants to hitch the donkey, because again, but he's an old man. He has all this wealth. The answer is because at that moment, Avram, the old man, 137 years old, he may be slightly infirm. At that moment, he doesn't exist. All that exists is to Ratzon Hashem, do to God's will. That's the objective. As a result of that, he hitched his own donkey for that reason. So that's the concept of Avram B'Kelis Ashura, Vasin B'Kelis Ashura. That's the concept. We find, as we discussed, when Avram, and Alan mentioned it the other day, the Medrash, when he ran towards the angels who he believed they were humans, the wound of the Milah was still raw. And as he ran, there were driplets of blood that dripped out of his wound. That means he was bleeding. But he was so consumed by hosting those malachim, these angels, he didn't realize that he was even bleeding. And the merit of those driplets of blood that dripped out of his body, we merited the Korban Pesach, that we put blood on the lintel and on the doorpost at the time of Max Bechoros. You understand? That was part of it. He was so committed to Achnosis Orchim that to address this issue, as we discussed, the Chil Hashem, to address it, that take these people who are pagans and turn them into monotheists, all that existed was that. Nothing else existed other than that. And therefore, as a result of that, the driplets of blood brought about this unbelievable level of what? Of spirituality that we merited the Korban Pesach. That's the idea. But I asked the question, why? Why Avram, it was Avram B'Kalkos Shura, and why by Bilam it's a Sinah B'Kalkos Shura? Now, the Mishnah Pirkei Avos differentiates between Talmidei Avram Avinu and Talmidei Bilam. Who are Talmidei Avram? It was Ruach Shvela. They were low-spirited, meaning they had tremendous humility. They had no interest in what? In materialism. Talmidei Bilam was Nefesh Gevoa, Ruach Givoah, and Nefesh Rechova. They were pompous, they had an inflated ego, and they had an insatiable desire for materialism. That was Bilam. Okay? So how we differentiate? Humility and only material for the sake of objective. Other than that, there's no interest in material. Bilam, his students represented what he was, this inflated ego, Ruach Gevoah, Nefesh Rechova. This broadened type of nefesh, insatiable need for material. As much as you have, you want more. Now, why Avraham Avinu? Why did he have such love for Hashem? Why was Avraham able to come upon Hashem and other people couldn't come upon Hashem? What did Avraham see which the world didn't see? Avraham had a question. Mi balabira. Nobody else had that question. Even they had a question, but they were satisfied with a much lesser answer. Now, certain times the question is obvious and you're satisfied with less. Why? Because they have certain conflicts of interest, meaning like this. As I mentioned, Avraham is listed as the second most humble person who ever lived. Avraham himself as a human being, there's no sense of entitlement. Avraham has no entitlement. Avraham, when he looked at this world, he being a human being, he having a function, intellect, health, and the world to accommodate every conceivable amenity which is needed for his function, and his level of accomplishment is there. He had a question. It's not for me. It's not because I am deserving. I'm entitled. Avraham had no sense of entitlement. He's the second most humble person ever lived. So if he never had a sense of entitlement, whoever his benefactor is, why is he giving this unlimited, something borders on the infinite, which is existence? Why did he create him? And why did he create an environment which borders on the infinite? How? How's it possible? As a result of that, it evoked the greatest level of ava, of a love for Hashem. It was rooted in his humility. If you have no sense of entitlement, I'll give you an example. Person has pain. A person has nothing to eat. A person has no comforts. And somebody says, I will heal you. I will give you, satisfy your hunger. I will give you every sense of accomplishment in life. And it's going from the inferno into paradise. And you recognize it's your benefactor. What's your level of appreciation? You would love that man. He took you out of Gehenna and put you on a pedestal. Because there's no way to deny it. And there's not even a moment for a sense of entitlement. Well, I'm entitled because I was suffering. If you're humble, does not. As a result of Avraham, his level of Ava was unequaled. Therefore, Havak Makal Sashura. Bilam, on the other hand, it was Ruach Gevon. Nafshir Chava. As much as he had, he was never satisfied because he was entitled. When you're entitled, whenever you feel it falls short of that entitlement, you're upset. Now, Bilam was one of the three advisors to Paro. And he gave the advice for the final solution. The shibud, the enslavement, that was Bilam. Yisro Borach, Yisro fled, that was his protest. Eov Shosak. Now, when he gave that solution, he cast a spell around Egypt that no Jew was able to flee Egypt. No slave could flee Egypt. It was like this invisible shield. You couldn't break out of that shield. When Moshe fled from Egypt, he was a Jew. They couldn't understand how he was able to escape. He fled after they wanted to put him to death. He was condemned to death because he killed the Egyptian. He fled. They couldn't understand it because they didn't understand who Moshe Rabbeinu was. Now, when Balak commissioned Bilam to curse the Jews, and originally he had professed that God's under his control, then afterwards Hashem muzzles him. So Balak was getting upset. Here I am willing to give you anything, and now you tell me that your hands are tied. So then he went and he turned the screws on Balak. Balak turned the screws on Bilam. He says, you originally said that there's not going to be one Jew escaping from Egypt. Not only did one Jew escape, a whole nation escaped. Millions of people escaped. So what are you worth? You understand? In Bilam's, his claim to fame is he dictates existence. And therefore he's worthy of everything, every level of honor, every level of glory, every level of material. He, as he said, even if you give me a house filled with gold and silver, it wouldn't be enough. So it shows, from there it showed that he believed that the wealth of Balak should have been in his pocket. He felt he was entitled to everything. So what happens now? All of a sudden, you're looking bad. Here you said not one slave could escape. A whole nation escaped. And here you put on, everybody sees clearly that you're totally inept. What is it? What does it evoke in that person? A level of hate? Not to believe what kind of hate that will evoke. Therefore, it was sin on Mekalkal Sashura, because this was a reflection on his inability, that the Jews exposed him for what he was. Therefore, the Jews' existence was a total refutation on and condemnation on Bilam. Therefore, he couldn't tolerate our existence. As a result of that, if he could put us out of existence to eradicate us, he rose early to hitch his donkey, regardless of his megalomania, didn't make a difference. Because this was his essence. His essence was his ego, his essence was his glory. And now all of a sudden, we're a refutation on that. He has to remove it as quickly as possible at all costs. Therefore, Bilam is not Bilam unless the Jews are wiped out. That's why it's cinema Ashura. That's how we explained it. Alan, one second before you ask me 3 questions. Okay, Parshas Vayu Chayisora. The life of Sarah was Meir Shana, 100 years, Esrim Shana, V'Sheva Shana. I mean, the Torah could have said it was 127 years. What do we speak about? Each unit, 100 years. And every time we mention the years, Esrim Shana, Sheva Shana, then it concludes Shnei Chayisora. These were the years of Sarah. It's obvious. I mean, Rashi addresses this. If she lived 127 years, this was the life of Sarah. So Rashi explains, famous Chazal, when we speak about each unit of years, it says Shana. Each one has to be quantified by itself. When she was 100 years old, as before Sinai, until you're 20 years old, there was no level of culpability liability. So when she was 100, she was what? She was as pure as when a person's when they're 20. Ma bas chof lo choto, just at the age of 20, she's not considered she sinned. Sharei eno bas onshim, because she's not subject to punishment. Bas kuf lo chet, she was as pure, even though she is, but she never sinned. Ubas chof kebazayin liofi, and when she was 20, she was like a 7-year-old girl, liofi beauty. So the Mefarshim explain that a person, beauty-wise, stops developing by the age of 7. From 7 onward, that's called maturity. But in terms of the level of beauty, it stops at the age of 7. With Sari Menu, it continued to evolve till she was 20 years old. Okay? That's the Yofi. When she was 20, she was like a 7-year-old girl. That's when she maxed out on her beauty. So she had an additional 13 years of evolving to be more beautiful. Shnei Chayesora, Kulin Shovin Latova. Why does the pasuk conclude, and these were the years of Sarah? It's obvious if she lived 127 years, this was her life, to tell us that all the years were good. Now, the question is this. You know, we have, the Gemara tells us, just as a person says, Shechionu on a good fortune, a person says, when he has tragedy. I mean, is the Torah telling me that Sari Menu, she was at a level that she said, dynamis, that she saw Baruch dynamis, whatever God does, he does for the good. Right? I mean, that's expected of every Jew. And here we take Shnei Chayisora. Rashi says, Kulin Shavin Latova. Every one of those years was Latova. Now, when we say Baruch Dynamis, when a person says Baruch Dynamis, what is the person saying? although I don't understand, but nevertheless, because Hashem is Tzur Tomid Polo, Ken Lamun Avein Ovel, whatever he does, there's no iniquity in his justice. Now, let's talk about Avraham Avinu goes to Egypt. And then Sari Menu was taken by Paro. And if you read the Medrash, Avram was very concerned, Chas v'sholom, that she'd be defiled, and she was concerned. And all of a sudden, what happens? Paro realizes she's a married woman because she is able to command the Malach to smote him. They leave Egypt with tremendous wealth of one of a kind. Why? Because Masa over similar bonim. Why did Avram do Hashem? Why did Avram go to Egypt? Because there's a concept, Masa over similar bonim, that whatever the ovos, whatever they experience, is forecast the future. It had to set the dynamic. Ultimately, Klal Yisrael will go to Egypt. Avraham, being the founding father of Klal Yisrael, he went to Egypt. Just as after the Shibud, we left with tremendous wealth. As it says, every Jew was laden with tremendous amount of wealth. When Avraham left Egypt, he also left Egypt with that dimension of wealth. So everything which they experienced, it's not Gamzu L'Tova. They saw actually how it was the ultimate bracha. So looking back on her life, everything she experienced, whatever it was she saw the bracha. Not she accepted because Atzur Tomim Polo. Not because there's no iniquity in Hashem's justice. She saw exactly how this was crucial and fundamental for the development of Klal Yisrael in the most positive way. That's Kul L'Tova. Even the worst moment later was revealed that was the ultimate moment. There's a story with Arizal. He was walking with his Talmidim, with his students in the mountains in Tzfas. And they're a real simple Jew. And his livelihood is his donkey. And as the donkey's walking, it trips on a large rock and it breaks its leg. This is his whole livelihood. The simple Jew raises his eyes to Hashem and says, Baruch Hashem, if this is your will, I accept it. And then as he's moving the donkey has to be put out of existence. He lifts the rock with a boulder, and what does he find under the boulder? Treasure. Before he was an impoverished person. A second later, all of a sudden he finds a treasure. So it was the most special moment of his life that his donkey broke his leg, because that's how he came upon the treasure. The Arizal says to his Talmidim, you see this man, he doesn't have much Torah knowledge. His emunah and bitochen is so pure that Hashem immediately rewarded him, because he attributed that everything is the Ratzon Hashem and Gamzu L'Tova. Hashem gave it to him immediately. So there, the person realized that why did it break its leg? So he should come and find the treasure. Sorry, Menu, every aspect of her life, it wasn't, I accept it because there's no iniquity in Hashem's justice. There was no aspect of her life that she didn't see the bracha in what actually she experienced, whatever it was. Avram went into the kiln. She didn't know if he was coming out of the kiln. Comes out of the kiln. What was the value of Avram coming out of the kiln? We say every day, Ato Hashem Elokim Hashem, B'chata b'Avram, v'hotzeisu mi'orkazdim, v'samte shmo Avraham. Why did Avram ultimately merit to be Avraham? Because he went into the kiln. So at first she thought that's the end of her husband. Even though she was Kiddush Hashem, she had no problem, but it's still simultaneous, it's still painful. When he emerges, not only does he emerge alive, which is a ness, because he went in, Hashem says, you are the future of existence. You're Avraham. The whole world was created for you and for your descendants. So what initially was as bleak could be, hopeless, turned out to be nothing comparable to it. That's Kulna L'Tova, Kulna Shova L'Tova. Or Chaim HaKadosh over here has a question. There's a question in the Mefarshim. When Sarah passed away at the age of 127, and Chazal tell us what caused the death. Satan comes to Sarah Imenu and says, by the way, do you realize what's going on right now? Sarah was not aware that Avraham had taken Yitzchak to the Akedah. She wasn't aware. Because if she would have been aware, she wouldn't have allowed it. This is her life. As Rabbeinu Bachya says, Vayu Chayu Sora, the numerical value of Vayu is what? 37.
37, 90 to 127.
Meaning that what was Sarah's life? She lived 127 years. But what was her life? Her life was those 37 years that from the time she gave birth to Yitzchak till she passed away. That was Vayu Chayu Sora. That was the totality. So if she would have heard that Avraham was going to slaughter him, she would have created a problem. She was unaware of it. Now, Satan comes to her and says to her, do you realize what's happening this moment? Your son is on the Mizbeach. He's bound hand and foot. Your husband has a knife and he's about to cut his throat. As she was describing to Sarah what was going on, it was too much for her to deal with, and she expired. She died. Yotzad Nishmosa. So now, the question is, at that moment, when she died at 108, 127, was she meant to live many more years? Except because of what Sutton shared with her, her life was cut short. That's one position. Well, no, she wasn't meant to live more than 126 years, except her life ended as a result of this pain conjuring in her mind what was happening to her son. It's an argument among the Rishonim. Was it meant to be more, except it was cut short? Or no, she wasn't meant to live more than 127. So Chaim HaKadosh says, according to the position that she was meant to live many more years, if that's the case, if she would have lived those years, at what level would she functioned? She would have been Sarah Imenu. That means by being taken early, she's being shortchanged all the levels of accomplishment, the opportunity, which she never had those years to actually actualize her what? Her avodas Hashem. She's denied all that. So what the Torah tells us, that all the years that she was meant to live, although she lived other years, but because if she would have lived them, she would have lived them as she lived the first years. Therefore, she's accredited in the positive for all the years she didn't live as if she lived those years. That's the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. That's Shnei Chayei. Although she only lived 127, nevertheless, Shnei Chayei, the years of Sorah that she was meant to live, she's accredited for those years, although she didn't live those years. That's the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. Thomas Sorah B'Kiryas Arba. Sorah passed away in Kiryas Arba. That was the community. He Chevron. Kiryas Arba is Chevron. The Eretz Canaan. Vayavu Avram lispot l'serv l'koso. Avram, when he came back from the Akedah, he's come back from the Akedah, he comes to eulogize Sarah, his wife, Vilivkosa, and to cry. That he's grieving over her. So let's talk what's Kiryas Arba. So Rashi himself, this is the Medrash. Why was it called the Kirya, the community of Arba, of four? Al Shem Arba Anokim Shoyusham Achai Sheshai Talmai Vavim. The reason why it's called Kiryas Arba, it's the Kirya of the four. There were four giants that were there. That's what it's called, the Kirya of four. Dover Acher, another interpretation. Al Shem Arba Zugos Shenikru Shom Ishvishto. There are four couples that were meant to be buried there. Husband and wife. Adam and Chava. Adam and Chava were buried in the Marsa Machpelah, in that community. Avram and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov and Leah. These were the four couples. Now, we find that Ephron sold the Marsa Machpelah to Avram Avinu. What exactly was the Marsa Machpelah? Mara means it was a cave. This cave had like demons in there, all kinds of forces that if a human being would go in there, he would die. That was the reality of that, what that cave was. Avraham Avinu goes to Ephron and says, I'd like to buy that cave. So, Ephron, as they say in English, a sucker is born every day. Right? That's such an expression. Ernie, I'm not sure what they said in Detroit, But here you have a cave. It's like toxic to the nth degree. And Avram, who's this wealthy man, he's willing to pay literally a fortune for this. And he felt he has him duped. He's willing to pay. Initially he said, I'll give to him as a gift. And then, as it says, not only did he not give it as a gift, the amount that Avram paid, he paid a fortune for it. Because once he saw what he wanted it so badly, he says, you're going to pay an arm and a leg for it. Abra meir shekel kesef over la socher. And the Gemara says that although it says 400 silver talents, but it was a currency which there's no market in the world which would not take this currency. It was worth a fortune. Okay? Now, why did Hashem have this cave that it was so filled with these negative forces, demons, that if you'd go in there, you would die? Why? You know why? Because since Adam and Chava were buried there, and it was meant to be only for the Avos HaKadoshim, for the Avos and their wives and the matriarchs, therefore, Hashem didn't want anybody even to what? To enter that location, to even consider it. In those days, they buried in caves. Shouldn't it be even be consideration? It was like toxic wasteland. That's what it was. Couldn't go in there. Now, it was called Kiryas Arba. So Rashi says the Chazal, because ultimately there would be 4 couples buried there. At this moment, first of all, they had no idea Adam and Chava were buried there. No idea. But it can't be Kiryas Arba because there could be 4 couples, because the Avos HaKadoshim and the wives didn't exist yet. The only one who existed now is Avraham and Sarah. But did they know about Yitzchak, Rivka, Yaakov, and Leah? They had no idea. So why is the city called, or the community called, Kiryas Arba? There's only one way to understand it, because they're 4 giants. It was called Kiryas Arba. Now, but in reality, we always say that a name indicates the innate value of something. When a person has a name, as Shmoka Goram, the name of a person indicates the destiny of that person. What is the innate value of this community? 4 giants. That's what people believed, because there's no other way to understand it, because all that existed then were 4 giants who lived in that community. To say it's because of the 4 couples that are going to be buried there, no 4 couples. There's only 1 couple, and it was unknown that Adam and Chava were buried there. And now there'll be a 2nd couple, Avraham and Sarah, if they survive it. So Hashem, it already had that name, because that was the capacity of that location. Now, Chazal tell us, what's Hebron? Why was so special? Why was Adam and Chava buried there? So I think the Avraham Kodesh speaks about this, that when the Neshama ascends to Shemayim, there's a direct route, and sometimes you have to take detours. The most direct route for the Neshama to ascend straight up is the Marsa Machpelah. That's the most direct route from this world to the world to come for the direct ascent. And that's why that location, that's Hebron. The word in Hebrew, the word chibur is attachment. The chibur for the neshama to reattach to its source is that location. And Avraham knew that. And he knew that's why Adam and Chava were buried there. And that's why it was so special, the Marsa Machpelah, for that reason. And that's why it had to be this top secret that no one else could be buried there other than these special couples, which are the Kiryas Arba, the Arba Zugos. This is the reason.
Rabbi, why are the Gedol?
The Yovel Avram Lispod the Sorah. He came to eulogize her, V'livkosa, and to cry for Rashi. The Yovel Avram Beersheva, Lispod the Sorah, the Niskla Bisa Sorah Lakedah Yitzchak. Why does the Torah juxtapose the passing of Sorah to the Akedah? As a result of being informed of the Akedah that her son was being put in a situation to be slaughtered, right before he was about to be slaughtered, her soul left her body and she died. That was the cause of a death. That's the juxtaposition of the Akedah to the Pesach of Sori Menu. That's what it's all about. Now, there's a famous question which is asked. If we say Vayu Chai Sora, the 37 years Sarah lived, that was her whole life. So you can imagine a relationship Sori Menu had with Yitzchak, how close they were. We find that when Sori Menu saw that Yishmael was Mitzachik, and Rashi was Mitzachik, there were already indications of Avodah Zorah or Gilei Ara, whatever it was, inappropriate behavior. She says to Avraham, drive this maidservant with a son from our house, because I'm concerned of the influence he'll have on our son. And what does Hashem say? And Avraham was pained by this. Kol Hashem Tomash Sora Shma B'Kola. Whatever Sarah tells you, Shma B'Kola, that as a prophetess, she was a greater prophetess than what? Than Avraham Avinu. Sorry, man. So now, don't you think Yitzchak should have been at his mother's funeral? He wasn't a child. He was 37 years old. Right? There's no mention. He's not there. Where was he? Right? It's obvious he's missing. He should have been there. Was he even aware that his mother passed away? So the Ramban says that after the Akedah, Yitzchak stayed for 3 years on Har Moriah. Did not come back. Now, the question is, what was he doing Har Moriah? We find that Yitzchak later became blind. So there's a question, how did he become blind? So one interpretation is that the Malachim, when he was about to be slaughtered, the Malachim cried, and the tears, whatever this means, went into his eyes. And that's why ultimately it compromised his eyesight. Right? That's Rashi later brings that Chazal. That's one of the reasons. That's why he had his sight wasn't good. With macular degeneration, whatever it is, his sight was impaired very seriously. That experience, Vikra Malch Hashem and Hashemayim, Yitzchak is referred to as Ola Tamima. He's called the unblemished offering. That event that he was a korban and the ayah was in his place, it didn't in any way detract from his level of kedusha. So as we find the Mishnah tells us in Brochos, the Hasidim Rishonim, they would spend an hour in preparation for Shemon Esrei. It would take them an hour for the Shemon Esrei, an hour after Shemon Esrei. So they ask, the hour before Shemon Esrei is understood. To prepare, to have a proper mindset, before you enter into audience with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you have to have an hour preparation. The Shemon Esrei, when you have the audience, knowing who you stand before, you have to have, it takes that long, an hour. But what's the hour after the Shemon Esrei? Right? Shah Achas Lachat Tefillah. What's the Shah Achas Lachat Tefillah? Very often, I'll give you an example. You can all relate to it. I ask a question, and I give an answer. And the answer I give you, Siyata Dishmaya. It's unbelievable answer. And I look at you guys' faces, and okay, then I have another question to ask. Instead of absorbing it and showing how you're overwhelmed with the value of that answer, you're onto something else. Why don't you stop and reflect on it, understand what it is, and maybe wait a half an hour before you ask the next question? The answer is, what's next? You served the first course, what's the next course? Because if you got 20 courses, you're already holding by the 20th, although you just ate the first one. The tzaddik, the Chasim Rishonim, to be able to be beneficiaries of that experience, it took an hour to fully reflect and absorb and to be affected by that. That was the Shachas Lachat Tefillah. Yitzchak, it took him 3 years. He was there for 3 years absorbing what he experienced to have a full effect and internalization of that experience. It was 3 years. That's why he stayed on Har Moriah for 3 years. It's only after 3 years did he come back. That's why he wasn't at the funeral of his mother. And he was unaware of it. Okay, we're ready for the halacha.
Could we also say that it's such a special